All right. So, if we needed any more evidence that the Trump administration hates human rights, well, I'm sure cis, straight, able bodied men they'd be okay with, but otherwise, they don't care about anybody else. Marco Rubio removes LGBTQ plus people and women from annual human rights report. I mean, and he also removed sections on people with disabilities and government corruption. So they hate anyone that isn't white, which is ironic because Marco Rubio is Hispanic. And, I mean, a white Hispanic, but still Hispanic. And he. And he. So that's ironic. And how can you claim that you're trying to root out corruption when you're doing things like removing sections on government corruption? I mean, they've done so much in this administration already that basically screams corruption. And now they're removing any evidence of that corruption. How can anyone in willfully, how can anyone look at all of this and still say, no, they're the people for me, they're not corrupt? Or, admit that you're perfectly fine with corruption as long as they're doing the stuff you want. Because, I mean, it's kind of hard to claim that at this point that you don't know what's going on. I'm talking about just the people who watch my videos, because obviously if you're not seeking out this information, you're not going to hear it. How people can hear certain information but still be steadfast in their wrong-headed beliefs is just beyond me. But anyway, let's get to the article. An annual U.S. State Department report detailing human rights around the world will remove all sections covering the rights of women, LGBTQ plus people, and the disabled, as well as sections dedicated to discrimination against indigenous people and corruption in government, Politico reports. Okay, first off, I'm surprised that they give a shit about what's happening around the world. But I honestly thought that, once I read around the world, that this was going to be corrupt governments around the world, not just the U.S. government. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be corrupt governments around the world as well. So yeah, unless you are a straight, cis, able-bodied white man, they do not care about you, and they want to just use the ones that are left that they supposedly care about, use the people that are left as just that. They're going to use them to achieve whatever they need, and you're just a bunch of useful idiots. All right. The censored report has likely been drafted in response to the president's executive orders banning all diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in the federal government. And I was contemplating doing a video on this, but CNN obtained a list of words that the Department of Defense was using. And, you would expect DEI, race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity. Those you would expect. um, able-bodied, disabled, since, we're also including accessibility in here. But it also went after words like history and first. I mean, dude, everyone was the first to do something at one point, no matter who they were. Because that's how history works. So I was contemplating doing that, but someone at the Defense Department claimed that they're going to look at whatever mistakes they've made, which I can only translate to they're going to put things back when there's an outcry of their stupidity, like removing the pictures of the Enola Gay, or removing a picture of the flag being planted at Iwo Jima because of one of the people who was doing the planting. Because, not only do white men only exist in this warped reality, but apparently they only want you to learn history where only white men were involved, and that their egos are so fragile that apparently even being in the same picture as someone who is non-white is just beyond the pale for these people. Now, it's possible that they just went overboard and someone who isn't the public would notice that, wait a minute, this is just ridiculous. But given that this is the Trump administration, I'm not holding out hope. Anyway, the annual report is widely anticipated and read in capitals around the world, according to the aforementioned publication. Yeah, nothing like, being your own blurb, claiming how important your reports are to the rest of the world. I mean, I'm sure that they do read these reports, but that was because they actually tracked shit. I wonder how, with the fact that Trump is picking fights with everybody, and with all of these deletions, I wonder just how popular these reports are going to be. The report is used by advocacy organizations, lawyers, and others to assess political developments in foreign countries, need-based aid programs, as well as asylum claims for refugees fleeing persecution in their home countries. And since we're removing any and all mention of human rights, if you're not cis, straight, able-bodied white male, they don't give a shit about you. So, yeah, none of those programs are going to be able to continue. Because political developments in foreign countries, well, let me see. How can we talk about that when some of those political developments are about how the government treats minorities, how governments treat women? You don't have that, so how can you assess what foreign governments are doing? You can't anymore. Need-based aid programs. Well, again, if the needs are that women or minorities in a particular country need help, how the hell are you going to know that if this report deletes any mention of anybody who isn't male and white. Which makes me wonder how this works in communities, in countries where, like African countries where white people aren't the majority. So, yeah, this just gets ridiculous. I mean, it's bad enough that it's being done about white males, but it's stupid in countries where white people dominate. But you take a country where there's few white people, if any, and how does that work? Are you going to just use this as fodder to claim victimhood? I mean, it just makes no sense. As well as asylum claims from refugees fleeing persecution in their home countries. Again, how the hell can you do that if you don't follow human rights? If the only people you care about are cis straight white men, able-bodied white men, well, how can you decide who's being persecuted and who can claim refugee status? Well, obviously, since the Trump administration doesn't want refugees coming to the U.S., obviously they don't want the information of who is entitled to that status. So basically, they are trying to use ignorance as an excuse. Well, we can't take in these refugees because we don't actually know if they really do require assistance. So this is just one big way of putting your head in the sand and giving reasons why you don't want to help people. You don't want to help people in this country, let alone around the world, because, it's like what Trump did with COVID. If we don't test people, we won't know how extensive the COVID situation is. So then suddenly COVID doesn't become a problem because we are dealing with elementary school logic. The kids who cover their heads thinking that if they can't see you, you can't see them. Because that's the level of logic that the Trump administration is dealing with. All right. The LGBTQ plus section of the report usually included sections on physical harm, persecution, freedom of expression, and transgender rights. The entire section has been removed. Right, because we don't care what happens to the LGBT plus community in other places. Hell, we barely care in this country. I mean, why should we care about persecution of minorities? We don't like those people either. Seriously. No, I'm serious. I mean, I'm mocking it, but that's exactly what these people are thinking. We don't like these people. We don't want, but we also desperately want to be considered good people. And because we want to be considered good, empathetic people, if we just don't know that the problems are happening, we can happily live in bliss because, as you know, ignorance is bliss. If we don't know problems are happening, we don't have to feel bad about not doing anything about it. All right. Similarly, the women's section used to include subcategories on forced intercourse, battery, reproductive rights, female genital mutilation, and discrimination. Instead, the new report is expected only to have a section devoted to coercion and population control, though its exact content remains unclear. Coercion and population control? What the hell does that mean? Oh, I bet I know what it means. Forced abortions. Because obviously um the only time we give a shit about women is when they're broodmares. But if they're being forced to have abortions, well, then we'll actually pretend we give a shit about women because suddenly they're being forced to not to do their job. And obviously their only job, their only function is to pop out kids. Uh, but yeah, when it comes to forced intercourse, aka rape, battery, reproductive rights, female genital mutilation, and discrimination, we don't care about any of that, even if the rape results in said forced abortion. But, women taking care of themselves, women standing up for themselves, women being forced to um forced rape, battery. I mean, we don't want women who are strong and stand up for themselves, and we don't want to find solutions for women who are in shitty situations because that's their lot in life for being women. How dare they become women? Their only lot in life is to make babies. And so, obviously, if they have other ideas, they deserve to be raped or beaten. Or if you're a lesbian, you deserve female genital mutilation. And obviously, men are far superior to women. So, obviously, we should discriminate against them. The only time we give a shit about women is when you're being forced to have an abortion because obviously you're that men are have finally gone beyond the pale by preventing you from doing your duty, which is to make babies. Oh my god. In place of the deleted sections, the new report will contain new sections on religious freedom because obviously Christians should be able to do whatever the hell they want, whenever the hell they want, and they can discriminate against whomever they want, whenever they want, because that's what religious freedom means. I wonder if, I'm pretty sure though that it only means for Christians. I'm pretty sure even in countries where the dominant religion is, well, anything but Christianity, I'm pretty sure that those countries would get a low score on religious freedom simply because of Christians not being the main religion. Wouldn't surprise me. All right. Um some workers' rights. Ooh, some workers get rights. I'm pretty sure it's just the white males. Or possibly, maybe just males in general. Because again, there are countries where white males are not dominant. Anyway, human trafficking. Ooh, they might actually care about that? That's shocking. Child labor, which is surprising since there are some states in the US who seem to be perfectly fine with child labor, so that's surprising. And protecting refugees, which again, considering they don't want refugees coming to this country, that is rather surprising. So, yeah, except for the religious freedom one, all of that surprises me. There's a real question about the value of this report coming out under the current administration. Is it accurate? No. Is it politically motivated? Yes. Will it only describe human rights abuses by enemies instead of allies? That depends on who's the enemy and who's the ally, I guess. Because considering how Trump is treating what is historically been our allies, I'm not quite sure, you know, who's the enemy, who's an ally. Andrea Prasov, executive director of the political prisoner advocacy organization Freedom Now, asked, "Oh, honey, if you're brown and you're a political prisoner, they're not going to give a shit. I mean, just ask all those Venezuelans who did nothing wrong except for have tattoos that had nothing to do with the gang, and they were still sent to El Salvador to be tortured." The censored report is just one of many recent anti-LGBTQ plus actions taken by the current administration's Department of State. Early into the new administration, Secretary of State Marco Rubio suspended all passport applications requesting changes to gender markers, something that endangers trans, non-binary, and intersex passport holders whose gender presentation may differ from the gender they were assigned at birth. And I did a video talking about how intersex surgeries are still happening in babies because, the doctors know better what parts this kid should have, because obviously they were meant to be a certain gender or a certain sex. It's like, no, if something like intersex, you let the person decide what bits they keep. Anyway, 82 House Democrats recently signed a letter demanding that the administration undo this policy change. Rubio also ended all foreign aid for international HIV prevention programs, endangering the lives of millions. You might have heard the mocking of condoms for Gaza. Well, number one, it was, I believe, Mozambique, not Gaza. And it was to prevent HIV. It was to prevent HIV proliferation. So, yeah. Let's see. Rubio has also signaled his intentions to permanently ban any foreign trans athletes from entering the United States. Good luck with that. How the fuck are you gonna know that they're trans? I mean, Trump has singled out a couple of boxers who aren't trans, but who he and the rest of the right-wing wackaloons, part of the We Can Tell faction, are convinced that these two women are trans because their buddies, Russia, claimed that there was something wrong with their gender tests. And, they kept the methodology and the results hidden because that's how you perform any test that's not suspect, is you hide everything about it, so people just have to take your word for it. Because that's totally how anything works. Okay, let me see if there was anything else from Politico. Go to that article. All right, so here is about the same report from Politico. Trump drastically cutting back annual human rights report. Sections on women's rights and the security of LGBTQ plus people are among those being axed. The Trump administration is slashing the State Department's annual human rights report, cutting sections about the rights of women, the disabled, the LGBTQ plus community, and more, Because again, why should they care about anyone who isn't male, who isn't able-bodied, and who isn't straight and cis? I mean, like I said, maybe they're allowing for non-white males to actually be considered worthy of human rights, but wouldn't surprise me if the answer is no. The goal appears to be a far thinner report that meets the minimum standards required by the law, according to documents obtained by Politico, as well as a current and a former State Department official who were familiar with the plan. The move underscores President Donald Trump's resistance to emphasizing human rights both domestically and in foreign policy. He and many of his aides view the issues as one that impedes America's ability to engage with other governments on other topics, such as trade. Right, because all Trump cares about is making money. He doesn't give a shit if that country beats the crap out of their minorities. Anyway, some Trump backers also have ideological concerns about what is included in the Human Rights Report, such as references to abortion access. Right, because, abortion, we don't want women to have access to abortions, so why should we consider that a human right? Which, that is logical if you think that women shouldn't have abortions and you seem to know better than the woman who needs an abortion. I could see how that would make sense. But, the fact is that I don't care what you think of abortion. Most people who are pro-choice do not like abortion. They understand that sometimes it's necessary. So, yeah, it's just a question of empathy. We have it, you don't. All right. During Trump's first term, the report was scaled back in part to devote less space to women's reproductive rights. Right, because women are broodmares. They are just glorified incubators, and so they should just shut up and have a kid. Regardless of whether the kid and or the mother ends up actually living, that's completely immaterial. The woman's only job is to make babies. The annual report is widely anticipated and read in capitals around the world, and it is relied upon heavily by advocacy organizations, lawyers, and others who consider it a reliable and fact-based document. Asylum officers, for instance, use it to assess whether someone seeking protection has a credible fear of persecution should they be forced to return to their country. And again, since the Trump administration doesn't want asylum seekers, well, again, if they don't have the information, they can just say, la, 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 can't hear you, as opposed to, admitting they're pieces of shit for not wanting to allow asylum seekers. Because, and I have seen this plenty of time in my comments and other comments, that if you don't admit what you are doing is, if you don't allow yourself to read the information that shows that your views are wrong, then you can happily continue having your horrible views, and it doesn't affect your ego, it doesn't affect your view of yourself, because you couldn't possibly be doing anything bad if you don't know you're doing anything bad. All right, and this says something completely different what LGBTQ Nation said, which is that the annual report itself is claiming to be widely anticipated and read. So, with the Trump administration's changes, human rights activists worry about the quality of the report and whether it can possibly convey a comprehensive snapshot of a country's rights record. No. The answer is no, it can't. Because you are getting rid of quite a bit that goes into human rights. But, the Trump administration only cares about certain people, so. There's a real question about the value of this report coming out under the Trump administration. Is it accurate? Is it politically motivated? Will it only describe human rights abuses by enemies instead of allies? Again, silly, silly girl. It's going to just do human rights abuses by allies. Because, the allies are the enemy and enemies are allies now, so. Asked Andrea Prasov, Executive Director of Freedom Now, a DC-based group that represents political prisoners. Spokespersons for the State Department did not immediately respond to requests for comment. There's a shock. According to a March 14th internal email obtained by Politico, the department's Human Rights Bureau was already editing the report compiled for 2024 to get rid of several sections and limit the number of examples of rights abuses cases under each. The initial 2024 report was drafted by the Biden administration, but the Trump team will be the one to put out the final version. The Human Rights Report is generally unveiled during the spring, usually by the Secretary of State. It's not clear whether the changes to the report will delay the unveiling, a date for which has not yet been announced. Many sections are being relabeled and some moved around, according to 2 other documents obtained by Politico. But overall, it's clear huge amounts of information will be cast aside or seriously narrowed in scope. The original report section on women, for instance, included subcategories on rape and domestic violence. Interesting that the LGBTQ Nation article called it forced intercourse instead of rape. Very bizarre. Reproductive rights, female genital mutilation, and general discrimination. The newly constituted report will include a single section titled Coercion and Population Control, which could cover reproductive rights, but it's not clear how it will discuss other challenges faced specifically by women. No, it's not going to cover reproductive rights. It's going to cover forced abortions. Those are the only reproductive rights women are allowed. Women are allowed to have babies. But if someone forces them not to, that's the only right they have, is that you force them not to, and then they will consider you a human being. But otherwise, you're a broodmare. The LGBTQ plus portion, which traditionally have included sections on violence and harassment, the availability of legal gender recognition, and freedom of expression. The whole section has been cut, according to the documents. The Trump administration itself is cracking down on the ability of transgender people to be recognized by the gender with which they identify, which we mentioned. That removing gender markers from passports. I'm sure that they're going to remove gender markers from state IDs. Any identifying documents, birth certificates, anything else, military IDs. So yeah. Similar sections detailing discrimination against indigenous people, people with disabilities, and corruption in government also are being cut out, according to the documents. Right, because we love the corrupt government. So why the hell would we want a section on corruption? And, well, people with disabilities, Trump openly mocks those people. Indigenous people, well, the fact that the code talkers were removed from the Defense Department archives of pictures is a pretty good indication of what they think of indigenous people. But the new report will include some sections on topics such as protecting refugees, which again shocks me. Child labor, again shocking since there are states in this country that, are openly advocating for child labor. Religious freedom, which I'm pretty sure is going to be for Christians. They'll somehow try to fudge the data so they only talk about Christians and, nobody else's religious freedom. Some elements of workers' rights, which again, probably male workers, most likely white male workers, but again, we're talking about countries where white males might not even exist, so, or at least not be a majority. And human trafficking, which the Republicans are hung up on human trafficking. Granted, in the worst way possible, because, they're the ones who gave us Pizzagate. Who, if you don't know what Pizzagate is, there were claims that this pizza parlor, in the basement, Democrats were using it for child sacrifice, and they were drinking the blood of children to stay young or something. So, yeah. It turned out it was bullshit. This pizzeria didn't even have a basement, which someone found out after they shot up the pizzeria. But anyway, so they claim to care about human trafficking. Unfortunately, they're wrong-headed in the way they go about it, but they do claim they care. While some sections are being relabeled or shifted to other parts of the report, they appear to have fewer subcategories under them, meaning they will not necessarily be defined in as broad a manner as before. The section titled Freedom to Participate in the Political Process is being renamed Security of the Person. I'm sorry, what? What does that even mean? A section titled Freedom of Expression, including for members of the press and other media, is being relabeled simply as Freedom of the Press. Okay. So, security of the person, I have absolutely no clue what that means. I really have no clue what that means or how that's supposed to, restrict freedom to participate in the political process. I assume that the difference is that you don't have freedom to participate in the political process, but we're going to keep you safe, or, the bullshit that Trump said in his campaign about how he's the women's protectors, whether they like it or not. So maybe that. And the freedom of expression, including for members of the press and other media, being simply relabeled as freedom of the press. Well, I guess you can see where that's a problem, because freedom of the press is not the only freedom of expression that people are endangered with. Not everybody who's being silenced is the press. Not to mention, it's really rich that Trump is trying to silence the media here, but yet they claim to care about the freedom of the press abroad? Or maybe they're going to just concentrate on the press freedoms of the press they like. I'm unsure. I am very much unsure, but that is the end of that article. So with that, I believe that's all I have for this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.